Are you new to Valorant, or maybe you've been playing for a while but just can't seem to get into the higher ranks? Then this guide is for you. We will be covering everything you need to know to get on the right foot in Valorant. Now, let's get started by talking briefly about the game itself. Valorant is a 5v5 tactical first-person shooter that features many different agents with fun abilities, a rotating map pool, and enticing gameplay. The main goal in a game of Valorant is to secure 13 rounds to win the game, and obviously to climb the rank leaderboard all the way up to number 1 as well. And that's exactly what we'll be helping you do. By covering all the basics in Valorant, such as aiming, movement, economy, and how to continue improving after watching this guide, you're sure to get a lot of value out of this video. And for everything else you need to climb ranks and improve fast, there's SkillCapped.com. We take the highest priority skills to climb ranks fast, such as aiming, and then break it down into a step-by-step course that's easy to understand. You'll not only learn the basics such as crosshair placement and clearing angles properly, but also more advanced concepts like getting more multi-kills and repositioning. That's not all though, as every week we release 6 brand new VOD reviews where Radiant coaches teach you how to climb out of the exact rank you're stuck in. And if you're looking for something more personal instead, then we got you covered with our new one-on-one coaching at our SkillCapped Discord. All this seemed too good to be true? Well, don't worry, we're backed by a rank up guarantee. If you don't significantly improve while actively using SkillCapped, then you get your money back, no questions asked. So what are you waiting for? Click the link in the description below and get the rank you've always wanted. Alright, now let's get into today's guide. So to start off, let's talk about aim and movement. Since aim is the most coveted topic in any shooter game, we will cover it first. Let's talk about what crosshair you should use. There's a lot of options in the crosshair menu, so it can be super overwhelming, but a good crosshair I would recommend is Ten's crosshair. His crosshair is pretty standard, and I even use it myself. After getting our crosshair, we should touch on sensitivity real quick. The average sensitivity of professional Valorant players is 0.35 in-game sensitivity at 800 DPI. So I try this sensitivity and shoot around at the bots in the range, and adjust it up or down to your liking. Since we have our crosshair and our sensitivity, the most crucial aspect of aim in Valorant is crosshair placement. And there's a couple of factors that go into having good crosshair placement. Now, you might be asking, what is crosshair placement and how do I get good crosshair placement? Well, you should always try to keep your crosshair at head level. There are plenty of objects around the maps in Valorant that you can use to help keep your crosshair at head level, such as the boxes all around Ascent. If you aim slightly underneath the top of these boxes, then you will be aiming at head level. But after practicing aiming at head level for a while, it will become muscle memory. Understanding your reaction time is important as well. If you're holding an angle at head level, you shouldn't keep your crosshair against a wall. You should hold a little out into the open to compensate for your reaction time when you get swung by an enemy. That way you won't have to readjust your crosshair. Now, should you be bursting, tapping, or spraying your gun? There's a simple answer to that. At close range, spraying is powerful. At long range, you should try to focus on precision and aim for headshots while tapping. And bursting is the best option at mid-range. But bursting becomes a lot more powerful when combined with strafing. And that leads us to movement in Valorant. We won't talk about strafing just yet, but let's cover the basics of movement in Valorant real quick before we do. You can walk in Valorant by holding your shift key. Walking allows you to be completely silent, so try to do it when you're being sneaky to avoid giving up your position. On the contrary, running is the normal form of movement in Valorant and doesn't require any keys to be pressed. You should try to only run when the enemies can't hear you or if your presence is already known. You can tell whether or not enemies can hear you by the big sound circle around your character on the minimap. Some good times to run in Valorant are rotating from one site to another, rushing with your team into a site, or if the enemy team knows about your position already. Walking and running are cool and all, but crouching is what you want to do if you're trying to take cover, shoot more accurately, or just crab walk around. Jumping in Valorant is vital to get you into cool spots on top of bomb sites or anywhere else you can reach. You can jump by pressing space, but a lot of people also bind jump to their scroll wheel up or down. Jumping does make a sound cue in Valorant, so you should do it situationally if you're trying to be quiet. Now that we've covered the basics of movement in Valorant, I want to talk about strafing. All strafing is moving either a couple steps to the left or to the right. The best way to utilize strafing is by combining it with bursting. Burst strafing is arguably the most powerful shooting technique in Valorant. Here's what it looks like for an example. To burst strafe, you should shoot 3 to 4 bullets at a time, do a strafe, and then shoot again. You can repeat this until you win your gunfight, but this is a good shooting technique to practice. Now that you understand the basics about aiming and movement, let's talk about how to peak and position yourself for success. The way you peak and position yourself in Valorant can oftentimes be the difference between a platinum player and an immortal player. We want you to be peaking properly while also positioning yourself for success. So let's start with peaking first. Now, the most important thing to understand about peaking is that the further you are away, the less time the enemies will have to react to your peak. You should peak further away, like this. Basically, the closer you are to the enemy when swinging around a wall, the faster the enemy enemy can see you in Valorant. So when you peek from further away, you're minimizing the advantage that the enemy holding an angle has. A couple common ways of peeking in Valorant are jiggle peeking and wide swinging. Jiggle peeking is usually used to get information on where the enemies are before you actually commit to a full swing around a corner. A lot of people combine jumping with jiggle peeking as well because it makes you a lot harder to hit while you gather information. On the other hand, wide swinging, as the name suggests, is used to just swing wide around corners. But when you wide swing, make sure you do it very confidently, because if you half commit to a wide swing, you will likely die more times than not. Now that we've touched on the basics of peeking, let's talk about positioning, because good positioning can win you most fights. You should always position yourself in a spot where you're isolating one gunfight at a time. Being exposed to multiple angles is like taking a gamble a lot of times, especially if multiple enemies are alive. You always want to play the highest odds at survival in Valorant. And one way to help you do that is playing around your team. If you see one of your teammates is holding an angle, you should try to hold his back. That way you both create a crossfire where you can swing off each other's contact at any time. Now, after all this talk about Valorant's mechanics, you might be wondering about the economy system, and we've got you covered. Valorant's economy system is based around credits, which you can use to purchase guns and abilities. At the start of a Valorant game and the start of the second half, everyone will receive 800 free credit. There are a lot of ways to earn more credits, such as killing enemies, planting the spike, and winning or losing rounds rewards them as well. Killing an enemy will net yourself 200 credits, while planting the spike will give your whole team 300 credits each. When your team wins a round, you will be given 3,000 credits. However, when your team loses a round, you will only get 1,900. And when you lose a second consecutive round, your team will get 2,400. After losing 3 or more consecutive rounds, your team will cap out at 2,900 credits a round. Now that you've learned about credits and how to get them, you should probably know how to use them properly. And for that, there's a lot of different options gun-wise. For pistols, there's the classic, shorty, frenzy, ghost, and the sheriff. For submachine guns, the options are limited to just the stinger and the spec. For rifles, there's the bulldog, guardian, phantom, and the vandal. For sniper rifles, the marshal and the operator are the only options. And finally, for machine guns, you have the Ares as a cheap option and the Odin for a more expensive one. That can be a lot of information, but here's what guns you should be buying. On pistol round, I would recommend either keeping the classic and buying light shield with some extra abilities, or purchasing a frenzy with abilities. The ghost can be good as well if you like to be precise. If you win the pistol round, you should force up and win the second round as well. This allows you to have a bonus round on the third round when the enemy team is on their rifle round. The reason we call this a bonus round is because you basically get a free shot at ruining the other team's economy on this round. Since you have decent weaponry from the second round, it's very possible to win it and get a bunch of weapon upgrades for your team. After the first 3 rounds, you should really focus on getting as many rifle rounds in as possible. Rifle rounds are rounds where you and your team can afford vandals and phantoms with shield. To do this, you should try not to spend a lot on rounds where your teams are low on economy, otherwise known as eco rounds. On eco rounds, some really good guns to buy for not a lot of money are the shorty, sheriff, stinger, or the marshal. All of these guns have the potential to melt through enemies for not a lot of investment. Now, on rounds where your team does have money, you should prioritize buying either a phantom or a vandal, as these are regarded as the best guns in Valorant. Phantom is really good for close range engagements since the damage at close range is the same as a vandal, but with a higher rate of fire. However, the phantom does have a damage fall off at longer ranges. The vandal, on the other hand, has no damage fall off and will always be a one-shot kill to the head or 4 shots to the chest. So between the two, it is really just personal preference, but I would take into account where you plan on playing in a round and buy based around that. The operator can be a good purchase, but usually only on defense, and it's especially powerful on agents like Jet or Chamber since these agents have a means of escape. Now, if you're ever curious whether you should buy in a round, I would recommend holding tab to see what your team is doing and buy with them. Even if you think they're making a poor decision by saving or force buying, it's better to do it as a team than solo. Moving on, the next topic we'll cover is maps and their layouts in Valorant. The most common map layout in Valorant is the 3-lane map. The reason it's called a 3-lane map is because it has a middle and a main entrance to either bomb site. All the 3-lane maps in Valorant are Split, Ascent, Icebox, Breeze, and Pearl. However, some maps like Lotus and Haven have 3 bomb sites, so there's a lot more options for the attackers on those maps. And the other 2 maps, Bind and Fracture, are somewhat similar to each other since both have their own quirk. Bind has teleports and Fracture has the zip lines. Both also have 2 entrances into each site compared to the 3-lane maps where you have 1 entrance to each site and a middle entrance. These 2 maps have no real defined middle. Now that you know about map layouts, we can talk a bit about basic strategy you will see a lot of in Valorant. We will start with some attack attack side strategy since it's the more tactical side. Some common strategies on attack include rushes, splits, and defaults. A rush is just as it sounds. You rush a bomb site with your team as fast as possible to overwhelm the defense. Splitting is just as it sounds as well. You take middle and split a bomb site through the main entrance of the bomb site and middle. But a default is simple as well. All you do is split up as a team and cover all areas of the map, look for information until you have enough to confidently hit a site or find a pick. A default is also good if the team on defense is getting really aggressive. Moving on to defense, your main goal should be to delay the enemy team from pushing onto sites and stopping the spike from going down and defusing the spike if it does go down. If you know the attacking team is coming to your site, you should do your best to use any utility you have to stall and wait for your team to rotate and assist you. Just be sure that you give your team clear and concise comms. An example of good comms could be if you hear 2 pairs of footsteps outside A main on split, you should say, "I hear 2 towards A main." You should also be doing your best to play with or off of your teammates. You need to keep in mind Valorant isn't a solo game, and you should be asking your team to assist you with utility, or even jump peeking an angle for you. Learning about map layout and common strategy leads us right into rotations, flanking, and lurking. When should you rotate? You should rotate when there is close to a 100% certainty the enemy team is going to another site than yours. I would only recommend rotating if the spike is seen, or your team calls that there are 3 or more enemies there. When you do rotate, you should watch out for enemy lurkers on your way and be wary of them, because a lot of times a lurker will be posted up holding for your rotation. Now, when is a good time to flank? You should try to flank the enemy team if they are leaving your part of the map empty off. Applying flank pressure like this is good because the enemy team will start using resources to make sure you aren't able to do it again. So you should only really flank a couple of times a half if they allow you to. On to lurking. What is it and should you be? Lurking is when you stray off from your team on attack to find an opening in a different part of the map while your team is trying to take some map control. Your job while lurking is to find a timing to either kill someone who's rotating and call your team back to you, or find a good timing to flank later into the round. Lurking can be powerful, but I would only recommend doing it on characters like Cypher, Astra, or Omen, as these characters can have impact across the map without needing to be with their team. We've already talked about some Valorant terminology like defaulting, burst strafing, and bonus rounds, but let's talk about a few more we haven't talked about yet that you will hear a lot in rank. One term people throw around a lot of is clutch. A clutch is just somebody who won in a 1 versus X scenario. So if somebody wins a 1 versus 2, they won a clutch. Always remember to hype your teammates up when they win one. Another term you should keep in mind is utility. All people are referring to when they say utility is abilities. Finally, the last Valorant term I want to talk about is lineups. What having lineups means is that someone has practiced throwing a piece of utility at a certain spot to land somewhere specific. Normally, people are talking about Molotov lineups, as they are really useful to have for post-plant situation. Moving on, there are some common callouts across most maps. We've already talked about a lot of maps having a middle, but there are some more common callouts than just that. A lot of maps have a heaven callout. Generally, this is an elevated position that overlooks the bomb site. You'll hear this callout a lot on Split, Haven, Ascent, Bind, Fracture, and Lotus, and generally underneath Heaven is called Hell. Also, on about every map, you will hear people call out front site or back site. All these callouts mean are people are in the front of the site or the back of the site. Finally, another callout you should be looking out for is spawn or enemy spawn. All these mean is someone is where you started the game at or where the enemy team started the game at. Now that we've covered all the basics in Valorant that you need to know, let's talk about how you can make progress on your own. To start off, setting goals can be really helpful. One thing I like to do is deathmatch with a goal in mind. I'll go into a deathmatch and work on getting better at burst strafing, or maybe work on tapping heads. You can do this with anything you feel might be lacking in your own gameplay. Tracking your progress can help motivate you to keep working on your own game and improving yourself. But to have progress to track, you need to make progress first. Here's a couple of things I do to improve at the game. My favorite warm-up routine is going into the range, press the practice button, and shoot at the bots regularly for a few minutes. Then I press F3 to set the bots to strafe and do that for a few more minutes until I start to feel warm. Keep in mind, you should focus on being precise and practicing good shooting habits while doing this. After doing those two things, I'll hop into a deathmatch before I queue into rank just to see where my aim is at. If I feel like my aim is poor, I'll play deathmatch until I feel good about it. But you can use these methods to practice as well. The range has a lot of options to mess around with, and you can reach different elevations in the range to shoot at bots as well. Be sure to practice your skills in deathmatch also. I really recommend setting goals when deathmatching. Now, we can talk about all these things, but you're bound to make some mistakes along the way, and the best way to eliminate easy mistakes out of your gameplay is by recording your games and watching your games back for mistakes. When you watch watch your games back, it becomes a lot easier to see the mistakes you make in-game. Some questions you should ask yourself when you review your own games are, what am I doing to help my team right now? Should I really be peaking this? Or what did I do wrong in this gunfight? Something else that's good for self-improvement is to watch pro play. Obviously, a lot of plays pros make aren't possible in ranked since they have a whole team supporting them and they practice a lot of their plays. But what we mean is watch how pros peak angles, isolate gunfights, and how they use their utility for others and themselves. These are all things you can take away to your own game and replicate. Now you finally made it through all the basics of Valorant, from aiming to movement, peeking, positioning, economy, strategy, and how to improve on your own. You know it all now. Try to keep everything we talked about in mind. Even rewatching this video could help a lot to fully take it all in, because there's a lot of information here, and you should try to always keep improving. Keep practicing your skills so we can see you rank up all the way to Radiant. This was just a glimpse of what we have to offer though. Over at SkillCapped, we've got you covered with dozens of tailor-made courses that will teach you everything you need to know about climbing in Valorant. We'll teach you everything you need to know about mastering your mechanics so that you can start playing at an immortal level in no time. Along with this, we also upload tons of VOD reviews each week that our coaches record from looking at players just like you. So rather than paying for one $200 coaching session on another platform, you can get access to hundreds of sessions for just a few bucks. Not only that, but our coaches are also at the ready in our Discord. Take a look at your gameplay and tell you exactly what your issues are, if by chance you don't find value from all the other things we offer on our site. Use the link below for a discount link for your purchase today. And other than that, we here at SkillCapped want to thank you all for watching, and we'll catch you in the next one.